Hello, this is my very first ever Instagram Live. It's lovely to see you. The idea of this is I am doing a new online course all about birthing your creative project. And so I'm going to be speaking to a whole bunch of different people who I am going to be interviewing. Hello, Ellie. Hello, Grace. All about how they birth their creative projects. So I'm going to be speaking to a variety of different people, and today I'm going to be speaking to Grace Gelder, who's an amazing photographer, and I'm hoping that she's joining right now because I haven't done this before. So I've just accepted her invitation. Let's see if this works. Yay!
Hello.
Hello, Grace.
I figured it out.
Brilliant. Good work. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, love. Yeah.
Are you?
Getting cozy inside with this weather.
I know. It's a bit of a change, isn't it? Now, you've just come back from you've done artist residencies in India and Costa Rica in the last 6 months, haven't you?
Yes, that's true. Yes.
It must be right. Where are you right now?
Now I'm in Shropshire in Ironbridge. So, yeah, quite different, but equally beautiful.
Good. And I like you bringing like sun lamp above your head, just as memory of the southern. It's pretty grey today. I know. He just tried to phone me there, and I just ignored him. So this is all about birthing your creative project, and I know you have, for example, recently birthed a massive creative project in one of the artist residencies, but you've also got a history of doing all sorts of amazing projects, both alone and collaboratively, all over the place. And I've known you for ages, but I wondered if you could just explain a little bit about the work that you do, and also what project, tell us about a project if you want to right now as well.
Yeah, so basically, I'm a photographer and I also teach photography in lots of different places. And I quite often work collaboratively with people from other disciplines as well. So I work sometimes with dancers, sometimes with writers, other photographers. Oh, there's a bird trying to get in the window. Sorry, that was really weird. So I quite often do projects that invite other people to contribute, and I really like to work collaboratively in that way. And I also teach photography and visual art in different places. So the most recent project that I did that you were just referring to, I had 3 months to dive deep into in India. I was based in Gujarat in a city, and the residency involved me teaching in a fine art school, as well as doing research and working on my own project. And although it kind of feels like that project has culminated this year, but actually the seeds of that project, I'm trying to remember exactly how many years ago. I think maybe 4 years ago, I was on a treadmill in a gym and in central London, and I had an idea. And I was thinking about my grandmother, and she'd given me a quilt, which took her a long time to make. So that's like an heirloom that I inherited. And I just thought, wouldn't it be lovely to find out about other objects that other people have inherited from their ancestors? And I realized it was a lovely way of starting conversations with people who may not remember or initiate telling me the tales until they told them through an object. So it was a lovely way of starting conversations without going directly into a subject matter and allowing stories to come from different places. And so actually the first time I tried this work out was a shorter residency in Swedish Lapland. And while it was definitely not long enough to do the project in the way that I did this in India, what it did make me realize is that the way that objects travel through the world is really interesting, because I was in the middle of Lapland. There was about, I don't know, 40 people in the village where I was staying. It was quite an important region for the Sami people. even though it wasn't above the Arctic Circle, they had a special gathering in that area. And so people that I interviewed, there were objects coming from Native American places because of the Swedish settlers.
Yeah, so across the Atlantic and ended up in Lapland.
Yeah, because there's a link between the Swedish settlers. So there was all sorts of stories of colonialism, different reasons that people would travel, different histories, sometimes painful, sometimes really lovely, but all held in these objects. And that became really interesting for me.
So it's such an interesting way. Is the project photographs of individuals holding objects? Is that what we'd see if we saw the work?
Yeah, so I can show you one actually from India. Yeah, it's the same premise. Basically, I would interview the individuals and meet the objects first, and then I would photograph them with the object. But that image, and I'll show you an example now, that image would be predominantly about them and less. Sometimes the object might be very small, so it's more about meeting that person. So for example, this portrait, this is a lady called Nita Day, and this here is the object, so you don't see it in that image, but you do.
Hold it up, because it's disappeared behind the chat a bit. Hold it up higher.
Can you see it higher?
Can't see what her object is because it's obscured by the rock. Oh, is that a cat?
No, it's not a cat. It's you know, in India where they chew the pan, so it's these cutters.
Oh, okay, now I can see. Beautiful.
And this was lovely. This was her late husband had bought her these, so they had a lot of sentimental value, and it just became a really nice way of taking portraits of very interesting objects and meeting interesting people and taking portraits of them, but also hearing stories that would quite often link to very personal, intimate tales, and quite often like stories and narratives from far away as well.
So in the project, are you writing alongside? How do you capture the stories and how are they related? Do you capture audio? Is there... How does the project actually look to us? A beautiful photo, but how are the stories woven into the photos?
So in the book, I put the text in English, and this was done in Gujarat, so I've had it translated into Gujarati. So there's the text which I audio recorded, then transcribed, then translated, and sometimes it was translated as it was transcribed, if you see what I mean. So it was quite a lengthy process, but it felt very important to have the story near the images. And then when I had an exhibition of that, then I sort of almost made books. So there was an image and you could pick it up and open it out and you would see the text and the image, but in a frame for the exhibition.
And so this book, do you want to show us the book? Can we get the book? Do you want to tell us?
Yes, you can get the book. I've put it on my website, which is gracegelder.co.uk. The book's called Belongings. A very good friend helped me come up with this title, which I was very grateful for because it just perfectly summed it up. The exhibition has been postponed because we're not allowed to meet in places together right now. It's been postponed.
Where is it?
It's going to be at the Menier Gallery, which is quite near Borough Market. What's fantastic, and I really hope this can happen, is that 4 people from India, from the city that I was living in and working with, are coming over to exhibit their work as part of that exhibition too. Okay. So fingers crossed that can happen, because that will be in November.
So just to bring it back to the birthing of it, because the online course that I'm leading is all about how these ideas come to us. It's fascinating to me that it was on the treadmill, because because it's a classic, because often our best ideas come to us when we're doing something that has physical repetitive motion, not when we're trying to sit down and make our masterpiece, not when we're sitting there with the blank canvas or the blank page. It's often when we're cleaning a floor or driving somewhere or in the shower. So for you to be on the treadmill when the idea came to you is classic. And I'm wondering about the journey. I know it's 4 years from when that moment happened to now, but I'm wondering about because we get lots of ideas, right? And not all of them, it's like a seed on the breeze, and some of them land and take root, and some of them grow and some of them don't. So from the moment that you were like, oh, hang on, treadmill, grandma's quilt, how does it go from that? How does it become something for you?
That's a very good question. And I think with this particular project, because it came from quite a personal, like heartfelt thought for me, like that memory of that, well, the quilt that I have and the memories of my grandmother are very strong. So I think when it starts somewhere like that, I usually take these things a bit more seriously than there's like wispy ideas, and then there's the ones that are quite important to you. And when I had that idea, I sort of immediately I start asking people if that's something that they have something to contribute to, if they would like to do some tests. And then quickly, I think I saw the opportunity to apply for something, the Swedish residency, which gave me the opportunity to test it out. I think I did about 7 portraits in Sweden, but it definitely didn't feel finished. But there was a big gap from that moment before I then realised that this would be a lovely thing to do in India. The context would be very different, and it was. But the idea had already been tried and tested, if you like. So then I felt like I could really go deeper into it. So there's lots of moments along the way where I think it's important for me. It feels okay to put things on the shelf for a while, because sometimes they don't need to be the main focus of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But when they have that kind of depth, I don't think you can't really ignore them. You know they're still there. I think that's the important thing for me. But because because at that particular time I was very busy, so I had to carve little spaces and moments to do that with other people in London. And I think for me it's definitely worked well to find and to protect space that's just going to be dedicated to work on that project. Do
you mean physical space, or do you mean time in the day?
For me, it's more about time because life in London before was obviously really busy, and it was very difficult to find the time and the space to do like deeper dives into creative projects, personal creative projects. And I was okay with that. Like, it was fine that I would work on them when I got a chance. But then I quickly realized that for me, going on an artist residency, the whole point of artist residencies is to give artists time and space, and depending on the terms and conditions, support in order to do a project that you might otherwise not have the opportunity to do. So that's one way that's worked very well for me. If I look back over the last 3 years, the most progress I've made.
It's such an amazing opportunity, isn't it? And for those of us who don't, I've never been on an artist. I mean, my entire life on my boat feels like an artist residency, honestly. Like, what shall I do now? But and because this is such a short amount of time, and I would love to ask you loads of other things. Maybe we should take another opportunity, because I'm really curious about the space where you, the transition from the idea, the knowing that it has depth, the making micro moments of time to commit to it, and then those grow. Is that a fair? I mean, that's a very Is that a fair summation of what this one went through?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it feels like with me, like when I might have a few projects going on at the same time, and I'll kind of think about them quite frequently. So they'll occupy a lot of thinking space. And it's almost like I'm sort of like surveying the landscape, looking for opportunities to kind of take them further. And sometimes that doesn't work and it's not possible. But I've just seen that some of the students that I had in Gujarat have joined, so that's really lovely. Hey guys. Yeah, and so I think that when you have an opportunity to develop something in more depth for longer, it's a complete gift. But if that's not possible, then I think the best way that I've found to work on things that don't have a residency to fill up, then more discipline is certainly required, and maybe just take yourself off somewhere for a weekend and work on something in that way.
Or even I find half an hour a day I feel like if you chip away at something and you do half an hour or even 25 minutes, which is a classic concentration span time, but you do it every or 5 days out of 7, you will end up taking that wispy thing and grounding it and potentially turning it, at least finding out what kind of seedling it is. I mean, sorry to overburden the metaphor of this thing, but as opposed to just going, because I've also had ideas where I've gone, oh, you and I, bye, you know, and they've never come to anything because they've never landed.
Totally.
And other times I've had ideas where I've spent loads of time on them and they haven't come to anything as well. So like to take something from your experience, treadmill, grandma idea, devoting time to it, piloting it, testing it out in the world, and then going out the other side, and now it's a book and an exhibition. It's I think we're probably at time, which is really annoying.
Gosh, that's gone quick. You can have another 5 minutes.
I know, it's really fast. I just, in case there's room to extend it, because I don't quite know how the Instagram Live IGTV combo works, so I'm just going to ask you one more question, which is, when you're working with the students who have just joined us, for example, how do you get them to take an idea from a wispy thing into something slightly more tangible?
So that's one of the things we did. I worked with a group of about 19 second year fine art students, and we all worked towards an exhibition. And this time we were working with performance. So there was a lot of photography to document the performance, and then there was also an actual live performance. And so one of the things I really enjoy noticing is how different creative mediums have different processes. And so to work on live performances, it was very much, and it feels a little bit awkward, but to keep sharing what you've done and to refine it that way. And so we would,
as it to literally get up and perform in front of people and get critiqued, and then
and like more times than is maybe comfortable for everybody. But with photography and writing, I imagine you can take the images, look at them, edit them, and you could do this by yourself, but when you're dealing with performance, it requires observers. So working with the students, they would explore a theme, or they would choose something that was important or interesting to them, and then it would be to flesh it out, would be by gaining feedback and, you know, be witnessed to share that, and then things become very apparent. And it's quite it was quite an interesting process, because performance art isn't something that a lot of them had done before, and they did really, really well. I was so proud of the work that they produced, and that will be exhibited as well in London.
Photographs of the performances will be exhibited, and
a video of the performances as well. And so I think different.
Well, didn't you? Sorry to interrupt.
I did that as part of my undergraduate. I did some performance art when I was at Dartington College of Arts. And I think that it became very much a share, get feedback. How do you feel about the work now as part of a group who are sharing together? And that was an interesting part of the creative process, because I think for a lot of creatives it can be quite difficult to share what you're working on. We're a little bit private about things, you know, it's got to be the right time to share it. And that particular project was a real teacher in how much, despite how you may feel about what you've done, continuously bringing it to an audience was a really great technique.
And it matches what you said earlier about piloting your belongings project by just taking photographs of 7 subjects in Lapland. I think that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because we get very, I'm working with a client at the moment who's got a brilliant idea, and she's so keen to get on with it, but I'm going, let's just gauge, is it time to make it into a pitch, or is it time to sit back and go, I don't know what it is yet, you know? And there's this really interesting dance between going, I want to let it become what it wants to become by giving it space to make mistakes and be in the, and basically pilot, not overthinking it, but then at the same time also being protective of something that's so young and new and fragile that you also don't want it to be squished by criticism. So being able to take it out into a safe space is a really important thing. Balance, but that allowing yourself to dare to take a leap and put something out in the world.
Yes, that's always the hard part, but it must be done.
But you did it really early on in the process, which I like. And I guess you have years of experience and courage in just going, let's just try things and see. So yeah, but it does take courage. It takes proper, you know, because we often live by, especially when you're doing something that means so much to you, we live by the responses that we get. And if you get a
Yeah.
negative response, how do you manage that? Just one fine, actually, because we're going over, and I think I'm just going to have to edit it down for the IGTV, but I just feel, no, it's not your fault, it's too juicy. I have a question about the idea itself and the way that it landed. So I have a theory, which I know you and I have discussed, and I know that the amazing creative therapeutic practitioner Pauline Lee also uses this idea, and it comes from all sorts of things, which is that the ideas themselves come to us like visitors that we are here to work with, that they have their own desire, they have their own will, they find a host and they land with the host and they end up kind of collaborating with the host. It's in the Liz Gilbert book Big Magic. It's also, you're in a very weird position, having actually had to physically dress up as one of my ideas years ago. You remember?
Oh yeah, I forgot. That was brilliant.
Another story, but like in a nutshell, I had not for profit. And I connected with the essence of this not-for-profit as a blue woman whose bidding I was doing. And then we had a staff party, and you dressed up like you painted blue. I love it. You're in a blue sparkly dress, blue wing.
I totally forgot about that.
I got
that was no fun.
Wing, wand, magic wand that you weren't allowed to speak. Sorry, Grace. Went around the staff party going, this thing, just being mysterious, because you represented to me the essence of the idea, as opposed to me or the team or the organization or the structure. It was like the soul of the idea, to which all of these other things were in service. And I love working with that, and that's very much the core element of this course. So when you were on your treadmill and the idea occurred to you for your grandmother's quilt, was it your grandmother? Like, how do you relate to the idea itself? Or, I mean, it's a really pointed question. You don't need to answer it in such a direct way, but the idea of the project, how does that relate to you? How do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, totally. I think I have zillions of ideas all the time. I think a lot of us do, and there's just something about every once in a while there'll be an idea and you'll sort of flirt with it a little bit, and maybe there's this kind of taking it slightly more seriously than other ideas, and that can be for a lot of reasons. And I do think different ideas resonate with us for different reasons, and because that was quite a personal it brought my own experience of owning an heirloom into the project. And I think that is quite significant because it meant that I took that idea more seriously, and it also had a lot more longevity. So I think that makes a difference somehow, because there's a sort of more conceptual ideas and they can just sort of come and go. But then there are ideas that sort of come to you and you sort of go, oh, yeah, maybe, and then they don't go away. And those are the ones that I usually end up cultivating. Yeah, exactly.
And do you feel like this current idea right now, do you feel like it's run its course, it's complete, you're done? Or do you feel like it's another way, it's gonna come back around in another way?
I mean, to be honest, doing it in Sweden and realizing that 2 weeks wasn't long enough, and then I would say I spent 2 months properly on. I could do that project in 2 months in another place, and that's what I hope to do. Who knows whether that will be possible right now, but I think that it's a really lovely thing to do in a place that maybe you haven't spent very much time, because it's a lovely way of meeting people and having like respectful conversations based on something that's very personal to them. So I would love to do that in as many places as possible around the world, because I just met so many lovely people. And I also have a feeling that the project would mean something different in each place that I did it to. So it kind of went a bit bigger than the original idea, and in India it very much connected to weddings and marriage ceremonies, because people would gift things during wedding ceremonies more there, so a lot of the objects were passed on during a marriage. That was very different to the objects I encountered in Sweden, and I imagine it would be another set of trends again if I did it in a different place. So it's something that I feel like I've honed the process now. I think the average time each shoot took was about 6 hours, mostly because dinner would be involved. So that was, that is very much a Surtees special.
Have a conversation on an empty stomach.
No, exactly. But it's it's part of the celebration, I felt like. So I now have
food as well. Was the dinner?
Sometimes that just went in my Instagram stories usually. Okay. But I also think that I do think that now I have more of a sense of like how much time that needs. I could propose that a bit more succinctly to do in another place. So I'm always looking for opportunities to do that. So if anybody knows,
so
we'll travel if possible.
So it sounds like, and forgive me for again possibly overdoing the metaphor, but like the idea landed on you, became a thing, came out in the world, took you to Lapland, took you to India, and now it's like you're kind of going, where are you taking me next? Like it's got the momentum. Is that fair to say? Like,
absolutely. Yeah. I would be very happy to do that anywhere. And actually, if I had a job in Mongolia in May, which has now been postponed, but if I do manage to go there, then I will probably take a week and do a few interviews for the same project over there.
So brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh look, we've got Ellie saying this Martha Graham quote hung above my desk about keep, and we can't move too quickly, but
keep the channel open.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly the point of this whole thing. Like the whole premise of the course is the idea that we cultivate the conditions to be able to do the best work we can by welcoming those ideas and then serving them, essentially. So it's like, how do you create the optimum conditions to nourish and allow those ideas to come out into the world? I feel like we could probably go on for ages. One tiny thing. Is there any new idea that you want to share just before we end, that you've just birthed, that you want to bring into that you want to talk about?
Well, as you know too, I have been working on a recent project,
I do, Grace,
which I'm just putting the final touches together, and it's a very simple idea that I've repeated again. I love working like that, and this is about friendship during lockdown. So all of the lovely friends that I have photographs of from real life, I have also photographed through Zoom or Google Duo or Skype, and I've put them next to each other and invited everybody to share some thoughts about how lockdown has impacted their perceptions, thoughts and reflections on friendship. So I will be sharing that soon. And
one of them is me.
And one of them is Tiu, and one of them is Ellie, who's just made a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't see who else is watching
this Instagram live, but not many, not all of you.
Oh.
And also, I should say that you took the photo of me. If anybody ever goes to my website, and look at the Who I Am website, the me with a massive grin and a hat and a red London bus going behind me, that's me. Somebody said, you look like you're eating flies.
I loved that shoot. That was such a fun day.
That was so fun. Grace, thank you so much. So just repeat one more time, where can people find you, and if they want to buy your book, how do they find your book?
Yeah, so on my Instagram, the link in my bio is my website, and there's a section there of shop, and you can get in touch and get a copy of the book then. I'm able to post things, which is lovely. And it will also be available at the exhibition, which will happen but later in the year. So I will also post.
How much is the book cost?
The book is £20 plus postage, so depending where you are. Yeah.
Brilliant. Ellie,
thanks to you.
You're such a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. And we've begun. I've begun. This is a beginning. It's a beginning. This is a birthing of a creative project right now.
It is. That's so true.
Right.
Lovely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Grace.
thank
Lots
you
of
to
love.
you.
Take
I'll
care.
speak to you soon. Bye. Bye.
Bye.